This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for downloading another episode on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. This is the Detroit Sports Countdown, where we rank the top 5 stories in the world of Detroit sports. And what a week it was. Stay tuned. I think many of you know, based on the podcast that we do, what the number one story may be this week in Detroit sports. It was an exciting week, lots to get to. But before we get into the countdown, we want to thank the many people who help keep these podcasts on the airwaves and keep it on the internet. We want to thank our sponsors, Fanatic U, the Detroit Beard Collective, Team Top Cat Sales. We can't thank you guys enough for sponsoring this fine podcast network and helping us to keep the 6 to 7 shows that we run each and every week on the airwaves. We also want to thank the DetroitSportsNation.com website for hosting and being a very supportive partner in terms of our project. Everything that we've done since way back in 2013 has been excellent, and the partnership with the Detroit Sports Nation has really been successful. We want to thank them for hosting each and every podcast that you hear. This week, we got a lot to talk about, lots of news and notes in the world of Detroit sports, but as everybody knows, we're recording this on Sunday. We're all gripping. We're all waiting to hear what the news is going to be regarding Jim Caldwell. Got the bat phones out, checking Twitter, checking the sources. I got a chance even to call Jim Caldwell's agent, but didn't pick up. It's Sunday, probably doesn't want to talk to the doc. I mean, come on, are you serious? Why would he spend his time talking to the doc when maybe there's not even any decision made yet regarding the future of head coach Jim Caldwell? We're all waiting. We're all watching. Lots of response regarding the fans out there who are very curious and want to know what's going to happen with the head coach of the Detroit Lions. Are they going to keep him? Does he earn his third season, which he is contracted under? Is he going to stay here? Is he going to be relieved of his duties? A lot of people are saying that potentially on Sunday a decision will be made. I don't think so. I mean, a lot of things have to take place, and I don't know if they're going to take place all in one day in order to be able to relieve someone of their duties. But we're all waiting and seeing, and we're all going to see what the future holds for the Lions organization. And stay tuned. Maybe you'll hear more about thoughts about the Lions later on in this podcast. But let's get right into the podcast. Thank to the producer of this very fine show, Kenny Frenzel. Don't think I have too many stories outside of the top 5 that crossed my attention this week. Lots of very intense focus on the top 5. So there's going to be no Kenny Frenzel honorable mentions this week. I think I'm just going to stick to the top 5 stories and give the opinions and rank the stories from the doc's opinion as to what were the top 5 stories this week in Detroit sports. Kicking off the countdown, the Hall of Fame voting took place this week, and, obviously very well-deserving class with Mike Piazza and led by Ken Griffey Jr. A lot of people were talking about why did the 3 writers not include Ken Griffey Jr., but there is kind of a baseball code not to have too many people enter unanimously. But if there was one, it would have been Ken Griffey. Ken Griffey and Mike Piazza, well-deserved placement. But for here in Detroit, again, it brings up the fact that Alan Trammell is now officially off of the ballot. He never really came close to the 75% that you needed to get voted into the Hall of Fame. Now, a lot of people will say maybe he'll get voted in through the Veterans Division and things like that. But, the honor of being voted in by the baseball writers is something that a lot of people look to. So, you talk about Alan Trammell, and these parts of towns, the support is overwhelming. When you look at his numbers and you compare those to other players that are in the Hall of Fame, Alan Trammell deserves to be there. I mean, all you got to do basically is stack his numbers and his career and compare it to Ozzie Smith. And when you look at his numbers, then you really say, you know what? These numbers are pretty comparable. I mean, Alan Trammell had a great career, was part of one of the best shortstop, second base tandem in all of baseball. The 1984 Tigers were really a special baseball team, starting off the year 35-5, going wire to wire, and Alan Trammell was an integral part of that team. And so for him not to be in the Hall of Fame really leads people to question why and were the 1984 Tigers disrespected, because not too many national accolades for that storied baseball team. And people will say that Alan Trammell is deserving of being a Hall of Famer, and I agree. When you just look at his career and you look at the numbers compared to others that played his position that are in the Hall of Fame, you think that, and you know that Alan Trammell belongs there. And I read a piece earlier this week in the newspaper that talked about, how when Alan Trammell was not voted the AL MVP in 1987, then manager Marky Anderson was really frustrated, really upset, and knowing that potentially that accolade could have also helped in terms of establishing and really raising the relevance of Alan Trammell nationally. Because if you really think about it, if Alan Trammell had played his career and put up those numbers in New York, I really feel like he would have been really praised. He would have been looked upon by the media as a prominent, shortstop and a guy that could be a prominent figure in baseball. But because he played in Detroit, he wasn't given that respect nationally, and you can see that based on the voting that took place each and every year on the 15, in the 15 years that he was on the ballot, he was nowhere near the 75% that you need to get into the Hall of Fame. And it's just a shame because a guy like Alan Trammell, a guy that personifies class, playing baseball the right way, is someone that I believe is deserving of being in the Hall of Fame, and he was just left out. And now we wait and see if he transitions now to the Veterans Division and if they decide to put him in while he's still alive, because the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame, has been known to put in individuals after they've passed away. And I do believe that Alan Trammell deserves his day in the sun. He deserves a chance to be recognized for the great career that he had. Him and Lou Whitaker, Jack Morris, you could make a lot of arguments that several members of that 1984 team should be in the Hall of Fame. Why aren't they getting that respect? Why is it that they are not getting the proper accolades that they deserve when that team really did a lot of things in baseball, things that hadn't been seen in quite a while? That 35-5 start, going wire to wire, the Bless You Boys, they were able to rally a city and bring a city closer together. And the career that Alan Trammell had didn't just end at 1984. He went on to have great numbers, and he was a significant force, in terms of a shortstop, a consistent player in Major League Baseball. So for him not to be included in the Hall of Fame is rather disappointing. It was obvious that he wasn't going to get in, but now he's officially off the ballot, and he'll now transition to another part if he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. So Alan Trammell not getting into the Hall of Fame, the number 5 story this week in Detroit sports. All right, on to number 4. What a great afternoon to watch some sports. I mean, you have the NFL playoffs going on, 2 great matchups. You have Minnesota taking on Seattle, and you got Washington, Green Bay later on this evening. And then earlier I was watching Michigan State take on Penn State, and it was announced earlier Sunday that Denzel Valentine returned, and oh baby, he provided that sense of swagger. Now his numbers in his return were not all that great, but Denzel Valentine's return is the number 4 story this week in Detroit sports. Came back, played a solid game, put up 10 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds. So he had a solid game, and Denzel Valentine, when healthy, can provide that senior leadership that can help this Michigan State team. They're off to a 16-1 start, and his absence luckily only resulted in that loss versus Iowa, where they really played listless, and you could have said that maybe the Spartans took a turn for the worse because Tom Izzo's father passed away, they were on the road, and they didn't really put forth the greatest effort, but they've rebounded nicely, and now Denzel Valentine's back after having, minor knee surgery, and look out, because Michigan State, when you look at this team, is poised to have a solid season. And whereas last year, their run to the Final Four kind of came as a surprise, a team that wasn't all that heralded. A lot of people, including myself, felt that maybe they would exit early the NCAA tournament, but they made a run, and they made a Final Four run. So now imagine this team, the 2015-2016 version of the Spartans. They got more talent. They look like they're a team that is, playing with a great chip on their shoulder. New stars are emerging each and every game. And now you got a guy in Denzel Valentine who, by all accounts, looks like he's going to be a solid NBA player, and a la Draymond Green could be a solid contributor to a team if they have success, depending on where he goes, if he gets drafted in the upcoming draft. But this season is shaping up to be a very nice season for Michigan State. And again, I like the fact that Tom Izzo tempers expectations. He does call the team talented, but he said this is not one of the best teams I've ever had, but it's really a team that can do some hard work, that has room to grow, that has the ability to have a super high ceiling. And this team, when you look at it, has got a lot of depth. They got a lot of key talent at key positions. And when they go out on the court, and when Denzel Valentine's there, they got a lot of swagger. It's one of those situations when you watch the team, it's a fun watch. They play a great brand of basketball. They're exciting. And right now they're kicking off the Big Ten season, and it's going to be a fun ride for Michigan State. And I really believe this Michigan State team has the ability to really advance far in the NCAA tournament. I think this is a quality team. It's fascinating to watch the evolution of the Michigan State basketball program under Tom Izzo's watch back in the day. And he started off 16-16, but then he built the program with the Flintstones. They had national success. They won the national title, and now they've been a staple of success in college basketball, making the Final Four on numerous occasions with different squads. And up until recently, if anyone had stayed 4 years, then they were guaranteed a spot in the Final Four. I mean, that's unbelievable, where it just was broken recently in the last couple of years. But every player that stayed for 4 years experienced a Final Four run. So then the argument will take place in terms of, hey, Tom Izzo and the Spartans only have that one national title under his regime, and does that make him an elite coach only having that one? I really believe it is driving him to get that second NCAA title to cement the program. I know he's chasing Duke and Krzyzewski. He wants Michigan State to be considered one of the elite college basketball programs, and getting that second title will cement that for him. He's turned down several opportunities to go to the NBA, most notably when he had a chance to go to Cleveland, but he wasn't guaranteed that LeBron was going to be there. And in the end, he made a great choice staying at Michigan State. You're going to have success. You're going to have the ability to go out and get talent. It's just what Michigan State needs is to go out there and get more national talent in both basketball and football. I mean, you had a chance to compete with Duke for Jabari Parker, but in the end, he went to Duke, and I believe that was really a disappointing blow for the program, losing out on a national prominent player, a top NBA draft pick in Jabari Parker. But the Spartans are still having success. It's just now time to really hit that well again and get success in the NCAA tournament. And I believe this year they have a really, really solid chance. There's no real dominant team in college basketball. They should be a top 5 seed. They should be a 1 or 2 seed going into the tournament as long as everyone stays healthy and they have a good run in the Big Ten. So Denzel Valentine and the Michigan State Spartans 16-1 start. Number 4 story this week in Detroit sports. All right, moving along, keeping this train moving on the Detroit Sports Countdown podcast, where we rank the top 5 stories in Detroit sports. Number 3 was a very fabulous accolade to one of our Detroit Red Wings. It was announced that Dylan Larkin, at age 19, was named to the All-Star team, and dude has just been playing some great hockey. The Red Wings have been playing a little bit more solid lately, now that Peter Mrazek has been in net a little bit more consistently. You've seen them play a lot better brand of hockey, collecting those points, and Dylan Larkin is a key piece on that squad, and he's been named to the All-Star team. The first time for the Red Wings that a rookie has made the All-Star team since Steve Yzerman, and it's very, he's very deserving of that. Now the All-Star game is going to be a little bit different format with whatever they're trying to do to spice up that game, and Dylan Larkin will get a chance, hopefully, to showcase some skills at the event upcoming. But Dylan Larkin, really, when you look at it this season, has lived up to all the billing. And what we expected last year was Anthony Mantha would look similar to this in terms of being able to score, being able to be a poised young player, and come up and contribute right away. When we had Anthony Mantha, he got a lot of hype from the media. He was a player that we all thought could kind of come up maybe early on and not have to get seasoned in the minors. But, the jump from the leagues that he was playing in into the AHL was quite a big jump for him, and he didn't have the first season that he wanted, and then he got off to the season back in 2014, 2015 with an injury, and so that set him back. But now you turn to Dylan Larkin, and his story is just amazing. Red Berenson came out in the newspapers and was like, he's awed by what he's seen with Dylan Larkin. He's very impressed. Everybody that watches him just talks about, wow, This young man is poised well beyond his years. He's very mature, and his game is mature on the ice. And his plus minus numbers are outstanding. He's on the ice for goals for the Red Wings. He's not on the ice too many times for goals for the opposition. He's a player that can create plays. He's got great speed, and he's got finishing moves. How many times last year did you watch players break away and not finish? Guys like sometimes Helm, Abdelkader, Tatar would have breakaways, and they just would have that difficulty finishing the deal. They have great speed, but they just would have hard times in breakaways, and they would have hard times in shootouts. But Tatar recently has made some beautiful plays, has scored some quality goals, has been at the right place at the right time, and able to get some rebound goals. So his production has been fabulous, and is one of the reasons why the Red Wings are poised to make that 25th consecutive push into the NHL playoffs. And when you say that, that number is staggering, and it should be talked about and respected a whole hell of a lot more than what I think it is. Potentially, the Red Wings could be in the NHL postseason for 25 consecutive seasons. And that's just amazing, because that gives you the opportunity each and every year with your organization to make a deep push, to make a run, because if you don't get to the playoffs, then you have no chance. But the Red Wings, no matter what, despite the changes in the salary cap, despite the changes in the rules, despite turnover in the roster from legends to more of a younger base of talent on the team, the scouting department gets all the credit for being able to, easily get through this transition, because there's been some clubs out there in the NHL that have had success but haven't been able to take advantage of it in any way. You look at San Jose; they've been up and down. They make the playoffs, but they don't have deep runs, and they don't do it consistently. Whereas the Red Wings, an organization that since the early '90s, since they brought in, Yzerman, Lidstrom, Fedorov, the Russian Five, they've been able to sustain this success, and it's fabulous. And now we're seeing something completely different in terms of a younger talent coming in and contributing right away. Whereas in the past, they've just shipped these young guys to Grand Rapids, to the minors, and left them stay there for 4 or 5 seasons because the roster was so deep. Well, that's not the case anymore. This roster is able to be easily cracked now. There's more younger talent, and a guy like Dylan Larkin has come up, and he's contributed greatly. And in past podcasts on the Doc and Jock Show, which comes out every Thursday, Adam and I would talk about, why not let these younger guys come up and learn at the NHL level? It's a younger man's game now. You see teams like Chicago, LA, Boston. They have a lot of youth. Tampa Bay, their youth, their core is outstanding. You need to have a solid core in order to have success year in and year out. And the Red Wings right now are developing that core. And if it's going to be led by Dylan Larkin, my goodness, you got to peek in and watch more of these games. The Red Wings have also now kind of secured the goaltender position, I believe. But we get a chance to see how they progress this week. But Dylan Larkin's performance has been nothing short of spectacular, and it's nice to see a young man like that come up early and handle his business and not get into any kind of trouble. Doesn't say things too often, just lets his production on the ice do the talking. And if that's the case, that's how we'll take it, man. Score goals, be on the ice for positive plays, help this team get to the playoffs, and maybe make some and have some success in the playoffs. It'll be interesting to see how his first entry into the NHL playoffs, how he'll go, because in the playoffs, teams will target him. They'll look to check him a little bit more, look to get him off his game, look to increase the physicality, and look to limit his scoring opportunities. And in the regular season, it's a chance for you to hone your skills and things like that. But in the playoffs, it's a whole different animal. The defenses can key in on your star players and limit them. So we'll see if he'll be able to, if the Red Wings make the playoffs, if he'll be able to sustain that success. And I'll be fascinated to watch if he's able to. And he's got my attention, and I'm peeking into a lot more Red Wings games. So Dylan Larkin, the number 3 story this week in Detroit sports. The number 2 story this week, just peeking in on the recruiting situation for Michigan and Michigan State. Both added some key pieces this week. Michigan State added recruit at the U.S. Army All-American Bowl, which features the best high school seniors in the nation. It was great because the state of Michigan's number 1 recruit, Detroit Kings 4-star receiver / cornerback Donnie Corley, announced that they had it nice and set up. He's got the 4 hats: Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Tennessee. And then all of a sudden, you get there, you lay out the hats, and then you start picking one, and it's all good, baby. Donnie Corley picks Michigan State, and it's unclear yet whether Corley's going to play on offense and defense, and he may try both early on in the whole process. But, it's really good. His last season, he had 59 receptions, 1,403 yards, 16 touchdowns his senior year at King, and he had a solid season. And it's nice to see that Michigan State was able to kind of bolster their recruiting class, because all the news and notes recently have been regarding the University of Michigan and who they got. Now, Michigan missed out on the number 1 tight end in recruiting, but they were able to land 4-star receiver Dylan Crawford, a 4-star receiver from California, was the first player to announce his decision at the annual U.S. Army All-American game, which took place Saturday afternoon. He's a 6'1", 186-pounder, and he had, kind of his list broken down to Michigan, Oregon, UCLA, and Miami of Florida, and that takes the Michigan number of recruits to 24. At the time, Michigan was ranked 4th overall in recruiting, and just the addition of a guy like a receiver of Dylan Crawford's quality moved the recruiting class from Michigan on several sites up to number 2 overall in the entire country. So Michigan's got 24 solid commitments, and they're going to be a very, very solid team now, because you're starting to see what type of players that Coach Jim Harbaugh is looking for to help with, to follow up on his first 10-win season with Michigan. Now, they did lose out on Isaac Nada, the number 1 rated tight end. He would have been a nice fit there. A tight end is a great safety valve for a young quarterback. You're starting to see now the emergence of what tight ends can do. You've seen it at Michigan State in terms of what, how Connor Cook relied on Josiah Price, and several key plays that if they broke down, he'd look to Price, and several plays were made in that front. So the tight end's a key position. So Michigan losing out on the number 1 tight end is a little bit of a disappointment, but you got a great receiving core coming back. You're now going to focus on who's going to be leading that team in at the quarterback position. So Michigan's fine. Losing out on a recruit like that is not a big deal. They're going to be able to find someone and coach them up and be able to have success in college football. So Michigan and Michigan State are continuing to recruit their players. Interesting news and note is that Michigan coach Harbaugh's football staff has lost its second assistant coach. Obviously, the defensive coordinator went off and took a head coaching job over there at Maryland, and now John Baxter, who was a coordinator of the special teams, took a job and rejoined the staff over there at USC. He was there from 2010 to 2013, came over and worked with Jim Harbaugh, but in the end, sometimes a situation that you were comfortable with in the past pops up and a better situation may arise, and so Michigan's going to have to look for a new special teams coordinator, and it's okay. I mean, this is what Adam and I talked about on our podcast, is that when you're going to have a program like Jim Harbaugh's, you're going to be able to, sprinkle around other coaches, because they're going to be very popular and very in demand. So it's going to be a situation to see how Harbaugh handles the loss of the defensive coordinator by adding the, new pieces, and now he's going to need to add a new special teams coordinator. But that's how it rolls. So Michigan State, their recruiting efforts this week, number 2 ranked story in the world of Detroit sports. All right, you've listened, you've downloaded this podcast across the various platforms, whether it be Podomatic, Stitcher, iTunes, DetroitSportsNation.com. All the platforms where you can find great podcasts is where you can find Detroit Sports Podcast Network and all the podcasts that run each and every week. And we're grateful for everyone that listens and supports us. And now we're at the point in the Detroit Sports Countdown podcast where we're at the number 1 story this week in the world of Detroit sports. It hasn't happened yet. Been recording for 20 minutes during halftime of the first football game here on Sunday, but it hasn't happened yet. Jim Caldwell has not been relieved of his duties. He's not been fired, so there's no news to report on that front. But the big news this week, Bob Quinn was hired on Friday to be the next general manager of the Detroit Lions. And from the Doc's perspective, a great move. I don't see any drawback in terms of going out there and hiring a top executive with the Patriot organization. He has not been tainted by any other NFL franchise because he's only worked for the Patriots. He's worked his way up from the bottom to be the director of scouting and player personnel, and he's a guy that's going to come in with a lot of respect and a lot of cachet, and that's a perfect hire. Now, you could say, if you're a cynic, well, he's never done the job as a GM, and so the Lions may require someone who's done the job, and it might be an overwhelming situation for him. But as long as Bob Quinn, age 39, sticks to his guns, does what he believes is right. I mean, he was privy to some of the best football information out there. He was one of the rare individuals that was allowed in the draft room with Bill Belichick on several occasions during the drafts. And, with how the Patriots run their organization, they're willing to let go of guys left and right, even if they have name recognition. And so he's got that information, he's got that talent to come in here and just really help this organization win. And that's what everyone's looking for, is a guy to come in and just change up the vibe. So welcome to Detroit, Bob Quinn. You got everybody excited because he's got no affiliation to the Lions. I do believe that President Rod Wood and now Special Advisor Ernie Accorsi are going to let him do his thing, and he's going to manage this organization in the right direction. And now he's got the task, the first big task is going to be deciding the future of head coach Jim Caldwell. He's going to have to come in and really make a tough choice, because either way, it could have some serious ramifications in terms of the assistants and the chemistry that has been established at the end of the 2015 season. Now, if you keep Caldwell, next year's schedule is favorable, and you have a somewhat decent draft where you don't take guys that are going to be ineffective like Ebron. If you draft a quality 6 to 8 guys and bring them in, and there can be of impact for you, which hasn't happened in recent years, then you can have a team that can rebound quickly and make a playoff push. Then in and of itself presents an interesting facet in that Jim Caldwell's contract will be up at the end of next year. So then if Jim Caldwell has a successful season, now Quinn is kind of in a pinch in that you can't, let a guy who's got a win-loss record that's pretty good stay in the organization, because you're going to have to give him another 3 to 5 year deal. So that's why I think it's in his best interest to let go of Jim Caldwell now. Not due to the fact that, you don't have to say that it's due to the fact that he's made some mistakes in the 2015 season. Not to say that he's a terrible coach. It's just to say, you know what? I'm coming in here. I'd like to let my 5-year stint here with Detroit be decided by my guys. I don't understand how you would come in, take a job as daunting as the Detroit Lions job is going to be. I don't know how you would take that job and stick with people that you did not bring in. Because in the end, Bob Quinn's going to be evaluated on the success of the football team on the field based on his drafts. If Jim Caldwell stays on and he has a successful 2016 season, then you're looking at another 3 to 4 years. And I think that in the end, Bob Quinn's goal is going to be to get this team to the playoffs consistently and get them to be a championship level team as quickly as possible. And it would behoove him to do that with people that he's close to, surrounding himself with scouts, with personnel people, with coaches, assistants, people that are involved in the organization that he knows, that he trusts, that, hey, I'm going to go to task with them. It's not to say that Jim Caldwell wouldn't be a good fit. It's just saying that it's a case of bad timing for Coach Caldwell, in that his general manager that hired him, Martin Mayhew and Tom Lewan, they were fired. And the 2015 season, the way it shook down, really wasn't a good one. Even though he went 6-2, Caldwell kept the team together and they went 6-2. I think it's enough to keep him around. And I'm hoping that Bob Quinn does a thorough search and brings in guys that he trusts. Now, the first name that people are talking about is Josh McDaniels, and I'm kind of leery on that guy because of his past. But again, he's got more tutelage from Bill Belichick. So maybe you look towards defensive coordinator Matt Patricia to come in here and take over, if that's the philosophy that Bob Quinn is going to be implementing. But the first press conference with Bob Quinn hasn't happened yet. He hasn't introduced himself to the media. And I'm just kind of sitting here wondering, a little bit on the cynical side, at his first press conference, will he bring up the word Super Bowl? Will he have a comment like a former interim general manager Sheldon White did that was a little bit of a faux pas, embarrassing? Will he have drop-worthy material? Is this dude going to be interesting to talk to? Because former general manager Martin Mayhew was as dry as sandpaper. He wouldn't talk. He avoided the media. He made like 2 appearances a year, and when he did talk, the things that he said never made any sense. So I'm hoping that new general manager Bob Quinn will come in here and be able to have decent press conferences, tell us what we want to hear, and tell us the direction of this team and how he's going to put together the Detroit Lions in a way that's going to help them succeed. And so Bob Quinn is now in charge of that. He's the new general manager. It's going to be fascinating to see what his early tenure is going to look like. I'm a little excited, I'm not going to lie, just in the fact that this is different. They've gone out and they've not carried over, they've not promoted Sheldon White. They have not brought in guys that have been tied to former regimes. This is a new guy, a guy from the outside, and a guy that knows winning. So he comes in here, and I'm just hoping that the Fords don't meddle, which I don't think they're going to do. They've been upfront and honest so far, and so far so good. And so I don't want to hear in upcoming years the likes of Stephen A. Smith go on his national program and call the Detroit Lions a loser organization. Now, we say it often. We talk about the Lions because we watch it and we're diehards. But in the end, we're all fans of the Lions. We all want success. I'm hoping that those that listen and download this podcast are still with the Lions, even though we may hate on them from time to time because of the crap that they pull on the field and the absolute absurdity of some of the moves they've made in recent years. But I'm still on board. I'm a Lions fan. I want them to succeed. I'm not Lions free. I'm a guy that watches each and every game and tries to tweet out as much as possible and interact and break down some of the Lions games and the thoughts that you see. But in the end, we all know this is a Lions team that needs to start having more success on the field and stop being looked at as a national joke of a franchise, which is their reputation. You own it, you live it. That's what it is. You can't hide it. You can't hide the scars. Everything that they've done is on the field, on tape, and the decisions and drafts that they've made have been documented. And I think there's even a documentary that's going to lament the way it's like the way it feels to be a Lions fan and supporter. So these kind of things are worth documenting and looking at, but now we look to the future. We look for success, and this team can be successful rather quickly with a couple of key drafts and some players that can produce for this team, whether it be free agents, the draft, and the existing talent on the roster that's going to be here for the upcoming future. So those were the top 5 stories in Detroit sports. If you agree, great. If not, let me know. We take all types of responses on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. It's at Detroit Podcast. I think it's one of the most interactive social media pages in Detroit. We read all the tweets and try to respond to as many as possible. And thank you for your support. To find any news and notes regarding our project, just go visit DetroitSportsPodcast.com. That's Detroit Sports with an S, podcast.com, and you can find all the news and notes regarding our network and our platform and our shows. Thank you for listening. We greatly appreciate your support. Have a great week, and look for us next week on the Detroit Sports Countdown podcast.